Welcome back to my channel, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and head on over to Sippy Couture Community Group on Facebook and join us over there. I have this ruler that I use for my nutcrackers, and it's all sectioned out into where all the measurements need to be. That way when it's time to start this nutcracker, I can just put this ruler right up to my white painted tumbler and go ahead on with it. This is measured for the 32-ounce plump tumbler from TIPSY Magnolia. I have my pencil and I'm going to mark the top crown area, the face area, the body, and that's it. Don't worry about the belt section. We're going to do that later. So I just put a little notch right here so I know where each line is. And then I use either my cup stripe assistant from the Amy's Make Everything, or I stack up different random items to get the size I need. So take your pencil, roll it around in a circle, get the exact lines so we can move on to glitter. The most important part of this design is making sure that all of your lines are super clean. So as long as they're straight and clean, this is going to be a breeze for you guys. I have my 1-inch painter's tape and I'm marking off the top crown area so we can keep that nice and clean. And then we're putting another strip of tape inside the face area, right against that bottom line. I have a thicker piece of tape and I'm running that in the middle just to make sure that face stays clean and our colors don't go into any other areas. I just love the look of this neon snowflake sheet from Mr. Nola's, so that's the one I'm going to use. I always start off by trimming straight lines. I know that everyone tries really hard to get their straight lines when they're getting these out for us, but every once in a while you'll have one that doesn't quite fall right. So I wrap that around and I get a little measurement of how big that needs to be. Get your cup stripe assistant and make a very straight line. This is so that we can wrap this vinyl around and make sure this comes out as flawless as possible. We're doing the hinge method. For this, we're going to cut away a very small piece of that backing and then lay it down flat in our tumbler. I always like to do almost a trial run where I hinge down just the side of it. I wrap the rest of it around without removing that sheet to make sure it lines up perfect. As long as it does, I lay down the rest of the sheet to the tumbler by just slitting that back part just a little, and then I roll it with my fingers and work it from the middle outwards to make sure I don't get any bubbles. It's a super easy process to do it like this because it pretty much just lays down on its own. Once you get that in place, I always use my finger to rub that crease really good to make sure I can see that line. I put a piece of tape and then I'll just use my razor blade to go along that line to make sure it stays really straight and I get a nice clean line for this. Go ahead, remove that piece of tape in the excess vinyl, and then we're going to take our ruler and measure off where the bottom of that belt needs to go. We're not cutting anything off, but we are going to give ourselves a line around the tumbler. That way we know how high these legs need to go so we're not jumping too far into the top of the body. Give yourself another straight line going down, put your one piece of tape, and then we're going to alternate pieces of tape. I find that this 1-inch painter's tape gives you the exact amount of spaces that you need, 10 pieces of tape. It's the exact measurements that you need to go all the way around this 32 plump. We're going to put that piece of tape down, cut on each side of the line to remove it, put another piece of tape to space us out, and then follow that same process of removing that inside piece. You can save these pieces or trash them. We're not going to need them anymore for this tumbler. In hindsight, I should have just left that middle piece of tape all the way up, because after I trimmed this off, I did end up getting a piece of painter's tape and covering up all of the areas that still remained of that sticky sheet. That way paint doesn't get on it and glitter doesn't get on it for our next step. But I didn't think that far in advance. I was kind of just in the mood to get this done. So in hindsight, go ahead and extend that tape up a little further past the belt. It's not going to hurt anything because we have to tape that off anyway. Also, I did run a strip right along the top of that belt. That way the top area of that sticky sheet is protected. All right, time to start with our paint. I have this Liquid X hot pink paint and it's super vibrant, but I did end up using 2 coats of this. So just go on those areas. Make sure you get that paint covered up, that white paint covered up. That way our glitters will be super bold. That's one of the things with this design that I wanted to make sure was that these neon colors really popped. So I ended up doing 2 coats of each paint as well as 2 coats tack it method of each glitter. You'll see that I do have foiling glue in my hand instead of tack it, but it's the same company. It's basically the same thing. I do find that this foiling glue is slightly tackier than tack it, so I tend to reach for this more, but either one will do for this part. When I am doing anything with foils, then I definitely go for the foiling glue, but for this, either tack it or foiling glue will work. I'm doing just a messy little section at a time right now because I grabbed too much of this foiling glue. So I'm doing enough to get it on each section, and then I'm going to wipe off the excess and then really go on and make sure that this is all in the areas and it's spread out nice. The thing with this tack it and foiling glue is that it goes on white, but as it starts to dry, it goes clear. You can also tell when it's starting to dry because your brush will get a bit grabby on the tumbler, if that makes any sense. It will glide on the wet paint, but once it starts to go dry, it'll kind of snag up on it. Make sure you're getting really close to those paint lines. You need to make sure this glue is almost wedged in there. That way you'll have all of those clean lines. After you get this all the way around, I like to hit it with the heat gun real quick, and then I drop my glitter on there. I have this really fluffy makeup brush that I like to use to apply this glitter. This is Dragonfruit. It's part of the Snowball collection from Mr. Nola's, and it's like a super ultra fine glitter. If you sneeze when you're working with this, it's going to go absolutely everywhere, so just be a little careful. I would go ahead and dust that on, and then with my finger, I varnish it in, whichever word it is. But you rub it flat. You're going to take the glitter and you're going to rub it flat in there. We're not trying to get it off the tumbler. We're just rubbing it flat and laying it all down. When that, after I got that all laid down, I did go in with a second coat of the foiling glue and then another coat of glitter just to make sure that was super bold. Moving on to the top, I removed that main piece of tape from the inside middle of his face, and then I took off the one on the bottom line and I replaced that over the top of that sticky sheet. That way this whole process stays clean. I'm doing one layer of yellow paint here, and then I'm going to do 2 layers of my yellow glitter. It's called Lemonhead, and it's also from that Snowball collection. I got my tack it on, hit it with the heat gun. You can see that I started to do it with a brush like the other one, and that was taking forever, so I went ahead and dumped it. Then I took my brush to wipe off the excess, and then I'm using my finger to go ahead and lay everything down. After that was all cleaned off, then I took my foiling glue once again. I did another coat of foiling glue and another coat of Lemonhead just like before. Removing my tape, and I'm going to carefully do the same thing to the top, but with the pink again. 2 layers of this just as before, so we're getting our pink paint down. We'll get our tack it or foiling glue. Drop down your glitter, use your finger to varnish that all in, then get another layer of your tack it or foiling glue, and then another layer of Dragonfruit and rub that one in also. Now that all that glitter work is done, I have my baby wipe, and I'm going through and making sure that I don't have any loose glitters on my sticky sheet. Like I said, the biggest part of this design is making sure everything is super clean lines and straight, and if any of that glitter has spilled over to any of that sticky sheet, it's going to make it look sloppy. So take an extra minute, really make sure it's cleaned off. I did take it outside and sprayed it with clear spray paint just to make sure nothing's going to move, and now I'm going on with epoxy. Once again, Speed Dry is my epoxy of choice. It is a thicker epoxy, which goes great for making a smooth coat with this, and then also it'll set up within 3 to 4 hours, and I can lightly sand it and then go on with my vinyl stripes, the crown, and the face, and it just works really easy. So use your heat gun to help spread it out, your torch to pop any bubbles, let this set up, and then we'll be on to decals. All right, you're going to see a very weird series of events here because as I was doing this, I did my belt and it wasn't seamless. And when I was getting towards the end of it, I was like, God, something doesn't feel right. And then I remembered I did my belt wrong. I needed to do it the other way that I normally do vinyl so that it is a seamless design. So I'm building everything off the tumbler right here to get it lined up. And like I said, excuse what you're about to see because my sequence of events will be a little off according to how it needs to actually happen, but it's filmed the way it actually needs to happen for here. The first big step is we're going to take our little triangles and we're going to put those around the tumbler. There's a reason these aren't welded together, and that's because if for some reason this needed another coat, I didn't want to have to adjust this, the cut size for this. If I just have these on where I can put them one at a time, I can put them slightly closer together or slightly further apart, and that will account for the layer of thickness that epoxy is. So for this, I'm just going to lay one at a time. As long as your first one is on there straight and flush with the bottom line of his crown, everything else will line up. So we're putting this on. We're going to hit these triangles right at the tip right there where they're touching. Make sure that bottom line is straight against that yellow and continue on with the crown. As far as the front side of him, the first part I always do is his face, and I make sure that is on the exact opposite side as the lines of the seam for the sticky sheet. If you need to, put your lid on and line it up with the back part of the sticky sheet, that way you can tell where your front is. For the belt, this is where it gets a little wonky. Put your belt buckle on first. Ignore the fact that there's a belt here, okay? Ignore that. Put your belt buckle on first, and what I need you to do is line up that top inside line of the belt buckle with the seam of his legs. So where we stopped our glitter going all the way around, you want that, like the tip of that to be almost inside that belt buckle. That way, whenever we take our belt and we actually lay it around the tumbler, the rest of that belt will go ahead and cover up all those other areas. Since the inside of the belt is a metallic vinyl, you will be able to see the difference where it hits against that belt, since that belt is a little thicker. So what I'm doing is I'm wiggling up just a little and I'm tucking it down to where the outside of the belt slightly overlaps that vinyl. That way you can't tell, and then you can also reposition, put it in there. This is a part that I was saying, and I forgot to film the first part of it. I'm just failing with this part. So I put that strip of belt on first, right up against that belt buckle, and then I lay it all the way around to make sure it matches up. And the same thing with the hinge method, like I always do, make sure it goes all the way around. As long as it does, I fully commit, remove the back, and press it all down. I'm going to cut off that extra so it's out the way so you can see this part, but I'm taking my craft knife, I'm getting my fingernail and I'm wiping it right into that seam to make sure I can tell right where that line's going to go. Then get your knife and go straight down with that line and give yourself a super clean line. Whenever you're doing this, this will make this whole belt part really seamless. And this is where I said, ignore those stripes at the bottom and the other sections that I haven't actually done yet in the video, but it was done in person. So we'll still explain all of that. The belt buckle for this inside part, the belt buckle goes on first before the hearts. That way you can get your spacing down. If you were to put those little heart sections on first and it goes down too far, your belt's going to look weird. So I always put my belt on first to kind of gauge that spacing for everything else. Okay, so this timing is accurate as far as the belt down on first and then getting those hearts around the top. And I don't know what that section's called, but those little heart ropey things, those heart lines, I think is what I called it in the SVG, which I need to apologize for properly later. So I line it up just with the face, drop it down into place, and make sure that's all straight. And then once I have that on, I go ahead and commit. Like I said, I layered this off of the tumbler. That way it was just easier. And I usually do that by sticking the bottom piece down to my Cricut without the backing pulled off. And then I lay it down like on my Cricut mat so the vinyl doesn't try to jump up and stick weird. Time to get all these stripes down. We're starting right here and we're wedging it right up against the top and cutting it at the bottom, and we're just doing one line at a time. I do need to caution you guys, make sure that this bottom line of your craft knife, whenever you're cutting these slits, you don't go too deep into your epoxy. If you do, you can jeopardize that seam of the epoxy, that seal, especially along the bottom, and you'll have a risk of it not being properly sealed. So be super careful. I always put those lines on before that final coat. For this next strip, I start at the back of the tumbler and I work it all the way around the front. Just make sure you follow those lines. And that's where, like I said before, as long as that initial line is straight, when you do everything, you're good. Like you're golden the whole way around. Just take the extra time, measure, make sure it's straight. Moving on to the triangles, I do not have a template cut for these as far as these lines. I just do them a little at a time. I overlap it a little, trim it at the top and bottom, and I keep going around. There's no other easier way I can think of this, and I don't quite have it in me to do a template for just those thin lines. And I really don't mind this. Once you get the hang of it and you get the first two nutcrackers done, it tends to go pretty quick and it's easy work. So just get your line, put it down real good, and then cut off the top. The same thing goes to the top as the bottom. Be careful with that craft knife when you're going along that top and you're not going where you already tried to establish a seal for the top of your tumblers. I won't try to do that until after I get this line on. So go around, make sure everything's cut, nothing's overlapping. You have it just shy of that top rim of the tumbler on the top and bottom to make sure that your epoxy will adhere really nice to that top. Okay, and here's something that can help you guys. For this layer, I'm using UV resin. Sometimes with thin vinyls, they have a tendency to lift under epoxy, and getting a layer of UV resin on here will ensure that it tacks down really fast because it will cure super fast with the light and really lay down before it has a chance to lift. And I actually know a lot of creators who do this. So get a layer of UV resin if that's what you feel safe with. If you are comfortable with your vinyl and you don't think it's going to lift, then just go on with speed dry or glass coat or whatever it is you use. But this current layer will be all UV resin. I'm going to go ahead and get a nice even layer on here. I'll set it with my lamp for about 10 minutes toward the top and then same 10 minutes towards the bottom, just to make sure that everything's cured nicely. After that's done, I'm going to give it a light sand with some wet or dry sandpaper, paying special attention to those edges and bottom to make sure that nothing is going to be pokey or anything. And then as long as that layer of speed dry that I'm putting on next is flawless, that will be my final layer. If there's any bumps or anything that I'm just not comfortable with, and I think you know what I'm talking about whenever you get to that point, then I will sand that one also and then do a final layer of epoxy. And again, speed dry is all I use, so that's what I will use. But I hope this helps for you guys. Like I said, I'm so sorry that this did take me a minute to get out to you. I wanted to make sure I had it just right, and I was trying to get that SVG done. Like I said, proper apology for that. My first time making an SVG. If you have any issues with it, let me know. Message me, text, I don't care how you get in touch with me, knock on my door. Let me make sure I have that fixed for you because it's a super cute design, and I'm willing to help with any questions you guys have. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Subscribe to this channel. Join me over on the Sippy Couture community Facebook group. Like I said, we have live codes, giveaways, and also a list of when I'm doing my in-person events and where. So like I said again, thanks so much for hanging out. I hope you love this. Also, tag me in your creations. I want to see your version of this Nutcracker. So that's it, guys. Have a great week or weekend, and I will see y'all soon.